We are live on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and start the recording real quick. This is Male Entrepreneur Podcast, episode 120. And record on this computer. We are live in 3, 2. All right, welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur with your host, Purdeep Sangha, and a very special guest today. Before we get into that, though, Purdeep, how's it going, man?
Doing good, man. Our last episode was pretty interesting in terms of the topic. I think today's episode is going to be like the complete opposite. It's going to be interesting, but it's going to be more on a positive note, I think, and probably a lot of good tips that are going to come out here. So I'm super excited to have Steve Pesavento with us today. Steve is also a host of a podcast, the Investor Mindset Podcast himself. An awesome guy, and I'm excited to have him on today because he's going to be talking about a specific topic that I'm really passionate about. I love this topic. I love real estate. I think it's a cool, you can say, way to invest. It's a cool way to make some money. But I want you guys to hear it from an expert out there that talks about this, that teaches other people. So Steve, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, super excited to be here, Purdeep. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So Steve, let's just jump right into it. So can you tell, I know your story. Why don't you tell the audience in terms of how you got to this point in terms of being a podcast host when it comes to the investor mindset, but also real estate in general?
Yeah. So for all of you guys who don't know me, I'm Steven Pesavento, and I host the Investor Mindset Podcast, and I'm an active real estate investor. And, I didn't always start out this way. I kind of, had always dreamed about being in real estate, but there's always something that held me back. And I'm sure as entrepreneurs, you guys can, relate to that feeling of like wanting to go out and build something, wanting to go create this vision that you have in your mind, but something keeps holding you back, that anchor that keeps telling you like, I'm not sure, can I really do it? Is this really right for me? Do I have the money? Do I have the background? Do I have the family? And, when I started my career, I was in management consulting, and I kept moving from client to client, looking for that place where you could find some of that passion. Because when I was in the corporate world, I was just starting to lose that passion, being surrounded by people who were really just there, to make a living, just there for the 9 to 5, so they could go spend a little bit of time after work with their kids and on the weekends. And, so when I finally got into real estate, I hit this threshold. I had, first read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which if you guys haven't, it's definitely a game changer. And cash flow quadrant, obviously, is the one that actually teaches you the difference between being self-employed, owning a business, and of course, being an investor versus having a job. So I read that book really young, but it wasn't until, nearly 10 years later that I finally bought my first investment property. And I had this, really unique kind of eye-opening kind of spiritual experience that really opened up all this possibility. And when I finally set out, I just decided 100% that I was going to make this happen, that I was going to go full-time into real estate. And I fired all of my current clients. I, essentially quit my job and went in burning the bridges, burning the boats, as they say. And, I don't always recommend that, but very quickly I went from 0 to flipping over 75 houses my first year. And then the last 3 years have done over 200 projects, as well as working on the commercial real estate side, putting together big apartment complexes that, partners come together and put all their capital in and, all benefit from that on the back end. So it's been quite the growth trajectory, but the real core of it was just getting super clear. What do I want? Why do I want it? Why is that important? Why is it a must right now? And then building a plan around it. And as soon as I did that, and as soon as I do that with anything that I do, I've noticed that things start happening really quick. And so it goes. That's how I got into real estate.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so right now, what do you do? So what's your podcast about? I know you're helping other people as well, like teaching them how to do this. So do you want to touch on that a little bit in terms of what your focus is right now?
Yeah. So the podcast is bringing together some of the most successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and authors, people like Chris Voss of Never Split the Difference, to Joe Fairless, who has nearly $1 billion of assets under management in the multifamily space. So really big names, and really diving deep on the show, understanding not only the tactics that they use to succeed, the things about how do you go and buy these properties? How do you raise capital? How do you do these core things? But how do you build the mindset? How do you model the mindset of very, very successful people so you can change your thoughts and beliefs to start actually taking the action that these successful people are taking? And so through some of the programming and mentorship that I have through the Mindset Members Club, and soon launching with some partners, the Owner Circle, which is focused on training multifamily operators to be able to go from zero deals to 1,000 units very quickly, mostly for folks in the commercial space, obviously. But what we really focus on is how do you get to the core of changing those beliefs, those things that are holding you back from doing the things that you're capable of. It's sad, but it's so true that all of us deal with this at some point. We have this belief, this thought, this anchor that's holding us in place. And if it's not one that's empowering us, we've got to let go of it. We've got to cut that loose. And sometimes it's just through hearing other people's experience, we can make a belief change, or we have to do some real work, which dives in, to some stuff that we have to do on paper and, working with coaches and things like that, so that we can really release ourselves to do the things that we know we're capable of doing.
Yeah, it just reminds me of because belief is the biggest thing. I've seen people become extremely wealthy in a very short time period based on real estate because they've just gone out there and done it. I've seen other people lose their shirts, losing everything from real estate because they haven't done it properly, or they're letting their emotions get to them as well, and they haven't really coached themselves or had a professional coach get them through. I completely agree with you. I think the biggest thing there is the mindset. It reminds me when I would think I was 24 when I first built my own house with a buddy of mine. So we were sitting there having some drinks, and we were like, you know what, maybe we should get into construction. And we're like, well, we don't really have the expertise. What are we going to do? And then the next day we actually went out and actually started looking for empty land to start building on. And within a week we had bought the land. And then within a few months, because of the permits and everything, started building. So it was just a simple conversation over beers that it kind of led to the start of getting into the real estate space. I think the biggest thing for me, and I want to get your opinion on this, Steve, is what is that one big hurdle that you think people have to get over to really get into this space and really do well?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that hurdle is core to each individual. It goes to those experiences or the surroundings that you grew up in, and whether or not you're in a family that was encouraging you to go and believe that you could go outside of what I would say the norm is of going and getting a 9 to 5 and, investing your money in the stock market and going that direction. But really below the surface, what it all comes down to is believing that believing that one, it's 100% possible for somebody to go out and buy one of these kind of, 100-unit multifamily properties and be able to run a $20 million project and be able to make that profitable. That's the first thing. And so when you can look around and see that other people are doing it, you can realize that, oh, it's possible for others. And then when you can bring that belief inside, when you can take someone else's belief, when you can take those examples from external and start to, I call it borrow someone else's belief, run with it for yourself, be able to try it on and, feel what that feels like, but then actually be able to prove it to yourself by going out and buying one of these $20 million buildings and running it and working with partners and other experienced operators who can, show you, hey, this is how we do what we do. And this is how we make sure we don't lose money. And this is how we run the business plan. And when you can try on that belief, but then you can prove it to yourself, then that's when you can really adopt the belief fully. And that's really what it takes to be able to go out and do these things. Because, at first you think, hey, well, I can't risk this money. I can't risk other people's money. I can't do these things. And you absolutely should not be learning on someone else's dime. But when you can put yourself around really, really smart, experienced operators and mentors and people who can show you the way, and you can be a part of that, you can start building that belief for yourself in a fairly safe environment where you can bring along other people for the ride and they end up getting that benefit in return.
Yeah, I think that's the one cool thing about real estate too. And that's the one thing I've enjoyed is that In typical business, it's tough to bring on other people like family members or friends because that can just be a complete disaster, right? If you bring them in, they don't have experience. They might have experience, but conflicting opinions. But real estate is one of those investments that you can actually bring people in, and actually everybody can benefit, right? So you can do a project with family members, with friends, and you can run it yourself, and they might not have anything to say with it, but so many people can benefit from that standpoint. Now, we talked a bit about um, some of the beliefs, but I want to get your take in terms of what's happening now and what you think is going to happen in the near future in terms of real estate. And I'll talk about Canada because I'm in Canada myself. In the Toronto market, it's overinflated compared to wages, for example. Vancouver is overinflated. We have a number of cities in Canada where the real estate is just ridiculously high. What's happening right now? What are you seeing in the US when it comes to real estate, both on the residential side and on the commercial side?
Such an important question because there's a lot of people predicting what's going to happen. But if you look at actually what's happening, we can make some really smart decisions. And so what I'm seeing happening on the residential side is that there was a slowdown in sales happening, but it's in part because people weren't able to leave their homes. They're not able to actually tour. And really, if we take the US as a whole and we break it down by every state and then every city that has ordinance within it, it 100% depends on the area that you're in. For example, if you're in California as a whole, the entire state has been on a pretty serious lockdown. But then if you're in like the city of LA or city of San Francisco, there's further layers of lockdown that are in place. Like here where I live in Denver, for a good portion of the time that we were dealing with the beginning of the COVID lockdown and the COVID pandemic that's going on, people were not able to actually even show homes. Real estate agents were not allowed to go inside of homes. So therefore, there was a huge slowdown. But as soon as we had that open back up, and right now, it is June 4th, and we are talking about, we are just getting to the end of wave one. Hopefully there's no more waves, but realistically, we could see things continue to happen. Once those things open back up, the number of properties under contract skyrocketed. People still want to buy. There's still a lot of action going on in the area. On the commercial front, there's been kind of a calming in the sea. A big part of that is because there's a lot of people who are on the sidelines wondering, we don't know what's going to happen, so we don't want to deploy capital. But the big part of it is people aren't able to go do due diligence on these projects. If I'm going to go buy 200 unit building, I need to go in every single one of those units. And for health and safety reasons, some of those tenants are not allowing people in. Some of the people are not sure that they can fly across the country to go look at assets. So there's been a little bit of a slowdown in trading that's been going on. A lot of deals have fallen through because of financing issues or, their business models changed. But I really believe that that's going to start picking back up here near the end of the year. But people who need to sell are still selling. And so if you're a real estate investor, if you're working in the commercial space, the key now is to make sure that you're really well positioned, that you've gone out and your capital is secure. You've talked with your investors. They understand what your business plan is. They understand what's going on. And if you're, looking at acquisitions, that you're underwriting for what the future could bring. And one of the things that I've been doing for my community is that every other week we're doing an in-depth webinar with people who have thousands and thousands of units on these topics. So you guys can check that out at theinvestormindset.com/webinar. We're doing those continuously. I think it's one of the best ways to bring people together from across the country and continue learning. So if you're a passive investor, go check it out because you need to know what's going on so you can make smart choices. If you're an active investor, regardless of what sector or asset class you're focused on, it's a great way to check in with other folks and make sure that you're staying up to date, because right now is the time to educate and make sure that you're really checked in on what's happening and what some of the best operators are doing so that you can be positioned as one of those coming out of whatever it is that we're dealing with here.
Yeah, really good point. I think you just nailed it from that standpoint that but prediction is a prediction right now because we just don't know exactly what's going to happen. And the same goes for any business is you got to make decisions based on the information that we have at hand. And I think that's the key point. So if you're a real estate investor, you want to get in, I highly encourage you to check out the webinars because information is power in these situations. I also agree with you that it's also very location based because yeah, the city depends, and within the city it depends. There's always going to be demand in certain cities, right? In certain neighborhoods. That's just a given. What's your take in terms of, because we have in the US, close to 40 million people out of jobs. And a lot of those jobs will return, but that could still leave, 10 million people plus, probably between the 10 and 20 million people, because a lot of these jobs are in the small business sector out of work. And eventually that's going to catch up to the real estate market. So what is your take on that? Because I believe, I completely agree with what you're saying. I also know that there's going to be an impact. How big that impact is, we still have to figure out, but that's a massive amount of people, especially when we have 1/3 of the small businesses in the US on the verge of basically going under. That's going to have a major impact on commercial space for that sector, you could say. And I'm just sharing this for example, right down the street here, there's a commercial building and they've evicted two of the tenants, for example, but they already have vacant units. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens because we're evicting people and whether people come in or not, this eventually will have a ripple effect. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, I'll just say that my focus is commercial residential. So units that people live in. So they're always
Right.
going to have a place to live, but they're still going to be impacted if there's major job loss like we're dealing with. But, on the retail side, clearly we're going to see some changes in people's behavior on whether or not they're going out and shopping. And therefore, some of those businesses are going to be, devastated. Some businesses were in terrible shape before this happened. And if anything, this is going to wipe them out. And it's going to give them a really clear vision that they're not in the right business right now and they need to go do something different. So I think we're going to have that across the board. Entrepreneurs, I'm sorry if you're in that position. I've been in that position myself. Now is the time to look at your expenses and cut back dramatically. And if that means cutting an entire line of your company and focusing on the most important thing, which is what's the direct path to revenue right now. So when it comes to real estate, we got to think, well, what's the direct path to revenue and how can I make sure that we are bringing in that revenue so that our investors are able to be in a really solid spot. So the key for us is that, yes, I do think that we're heading into what some might call the next recession, global depression. I think we're heading into a time where we are going to deal with major job losses, major GDP loss. And this is all, I don't have a crystal ball. Mine, is in the shop right now, but from the feeling that I get is that we're heading into a time where we might not be seeing that economic growth that we've been desiring. However, the benefit that real estate has that almost all other assets classes don't is that this is backed by a physical asset. This is backed by a building that is actually typically connected directly to inflation. So as we're injecting $1, $2, $3, $5, $10 trillion of cash into the US economy, and I'm sure Canada might be doing similar types of things, and other places around the world are doing them, where they have the ability to control the monetary policy that's happening in their country. But here in the US, we're pumping in a ton of money. So anybody who's holding cash right now, it's going down in value. Right? We're already dealing with a 2 to 3% inflation rate, which was typical, meaning if you made a 6% return on your investment, you really only made a 3% because you just hedged against inflation. Well, right now, typically most of our investors are seeing, somewhere between, we're shooting to get them a preferred return at 6%, but really over the life of that return, a lot of times they're seeing 12, 15, 17, maybe even higher. Now those returns might come down. However, the fact that they're going to be hedged against inflation is going to be a really strong indicator of why so much capital is still flooding towards real estate. I've been talking with my passive investors, people who've invested with in the past, and people who have never invested in real estate before. And they are like, find me a deal. I need a place to park my cash because I got to get it out of the stock market. The market's back up. I need to take it. I need to put it somewhere. And right now they're just sitting with it on the sidelines, but they know they want to get it invested so that they can, make sure that they don't lose that principal as that inflation starts actually happening in the next 3, 6, 12, 18 months as we see this start to play out.
So Nathan, I don't know if you have any questions. If you want to jump in here, because I've been hogging all the questions here.
No, I just wanted to say I agree with almost all of this. I think that there's, especially this last part, talking about what's going to happen with all of the money we've been dumping into the economy as a response to COVID-19. I think a lot of people are still asleep at the wheel as to what this is going to actually bring down on us. And real estate's the only thing they're not making more of. They're making a lot more money right now, but they're not making more real estate. So I listen to what Steve is talking about, listen to what Purdeep's talking about, because this could be information that could save your livelihood, save everything that you've worked so hard to build over your lifetime. And not enough people are talking about what's going to be happening and what you can do to prepare for it.
So Steve, I was hoping that you would talk about it, but I'm going to say it because, when in a recession or a depression, whatever we're coming into, real estate is a huge opportunity, just like anything else, right? If it starts to go down a little bit, it's still going to climb up. And typically when it climbs up fast. So there's a massive opportunity coming here for investors when it comes to real estate. Just finding that right, I'm not going to say time, but I'm going to say period of time, because it's never, exactly pinpointed. But, I know we're coming close here towards the end. What is that one opportunity that you see or your team sees right now that might be coming in the near future for investors that you would say, what, this is something you should be looking at?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think at the end of the day, we have to understand how real estate works, right? So in a lot of recessions that we've experienced, there hasn't been a huge reduction in value of real estate. It's only been in a few that we've seen huge reductions. So we may see a big hit on price, but I don't want everybody to be waiting around for it, because I got into real estate full time about 4 years ago. And I was in real estate, kind of passively doing some Airbnb stuff for about 7 years total. The whole time that I've been following real estate, everyone's been talking that today is the day that everything's going to fall. That next year in 18 months, everything's going to fall apart, and then it's going to be the time to buy. Well, if you waited for the last 7 years, if you waited for the last 4 years, you definitely lost out on some huge principal increases that you could have had. So what I would say is make sure that if you're going to invest passively, that you're investing with an operator that you know, like, and trust. And so how do you do that? Well, you go out and you listen to podcasts, you meet people like me, like Purdeep, like other people who are out there putting together amazing deals and bringing on partners. So if you're ever interested in learning more about what we do, I really encourage you to reach out and find out more. But the other thing is, if you're an active operator, we have to realize that interest rates are really, really low in the US. So if interest rates stay low, and even if cap rates stay low, which cap rates is a way that property is valued for those who don't understand it completely. When a cap rate is low, that means the property is essentially worth more money. So when cap rates are low and interest rates are low, as long as there's enough spread difference between what that interest rate and the cap rate is, you can still make a great investment deal happen. If the interest rates grow up, the cap rates are going to need to go up to allow enough of a return. So I think the big opportunity is to stay the course, to make sure that you're investing with smart operators who have a track record of experience. I think that is absolutely critical. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I've partnered with people who have 5, 10, 15 years, different operators in different parts of the country, to make sure that my capital, my investors' capital, is going to those deals. But the other thing to take note of is you got to be out there underwriting deals. If you're an active investor, the opportunity is there's a lot of people who put on 3-5 year debt that's going to be coming due in the next 12 to 18 months. So if that debt is coming due and they're not able to get a new loan, they're going to be in a position where you might be able to buy that for a steal, you might be able to get a good deal on it. There's about 120 properties that Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac have put out that are in forbearance right now. So forbearance, they've got a year to pay off the 3 months that they're not paying on their mortgage. So in the next 12 months, there's a possibility that, nearly 100 properties could come to market in some kind of distressed sale type of position. So the big thing is, even while the world is freaking out, we don't know what's going to happen, we're not sure, don't just sit and wait around. Take this time to educate yourself and build really great relationships with people that you trust to either invest in their deals or be alerted to when there's great opportunities by connecting with brokers, lenders, and all these people who are going to help connect you to those amazing opportunities that are really, truly in the market.
Yeah, great insight. I bang on. I think I couldn't say more on that particular note there, because real estate, as you know, that old saying, is a long-term game, right? It's not a short-term game. It's a long-term game. You got to have your wits about you. I see so many people panicking and they sell way too soon, or they, they're not smart about it. So to your point, I highly encourage you out there listening, if real estate's your game, take a look at Steve's website, his webinar. So Steve, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so I really encourage you, if you guys are looking to learn, to head over to theinvestormindset.com or head over to theinvestormindset.com/webinars to get connected directly to some of that bi-weekly education we have going out. And if you're looking to learn about investing with us and just explore it, it's a long-term play. You can head over to theinvestormindset.com/deal room to get access to the types of deals that we're looking at. It's rare that we find these kind of investments. So it's one of those things, we build relationships with folks over the long term to make long-term investments together. So I encourage you to head over there, and please check out the Investor Mindset on every podcasting app and YouTube. If you're watching right now, head over there, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to work our way up the subscriber scale here on all of our platforms.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you being with us, and awesome tips. I think every person should have some kind of investment in real estate as part of their portfolio. I'm just a firm believer in that. I personally believe in that myself. So thank you.
And thank you. It was so much fun.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the conversation. If you want to check out more, head on over to mailpodcast.com and YouTubeformin.com. And Steve, before we're out of here, if people want to check out your podcast, what's the best way to find that?
Yeah, the best way is go to theinvestormindset.com/podcast. You can find us on all the different platforms, from YouTube to Stitcher to Spotify to Apple to Google to everything in between, or just go to your podcasting app and type in the Investor Mindset. We'll show up right at the top. We are a top ranked podcast, so all the podcast apps know who we are, and we'd love it if you knew who we are as well.
Awesome. All right, guys, until next time, we'll catch you later.
Take care.